If you like combat in Star Citizen, I reckon you'll enjoy this one. With Star Citizen patch 3.14, flying multicrew became much more powerful, and so it feels appropriate to explore some of the options out there for delivering destruction to your opposition with your buddy in tow. I'm Forrester, and in this video I showcase 3 dual-seater fighter options in turn, and then compare and contrast them. We'll start by looking at the Super Hornet, the historic great of twin-seater combat. Then we'll look at the Gladiator, getting into the melee with big missiles ready to fire. And finally, of course, we'll bring out the Hurricane, with the big guns in the back blazing away. For this video, we'll stick to those 3 Anvil options, as they're all true twin-seaters, with no internal space. There are so many other options out there, including fighters with internal space or dual-purpose ships, but in the interests of drawing a conclusion, I've opted to stick with the Anvil options for this comparison video. If you enjoy this format and would like to see more ships duke it out in this mini showdown, be sure to hit that like button and let me know what you'd like to see compared in the comments. And naturally, if you're one of the 3/4 of people watching who isn't yet following the channel, you may want to hit that subscribe button so you can know as soon as new Star Citizen content goes live. So before we dive into each of the ships, it's important to point out, I try to be a fairly decent combat pilot, but I'm not a virtual Pete Mitchell, so take my opinion with a pinch of salt. And as with many comparison questions, there'll be an element of subjectivity involved, so whilst I'll share some statistics and my thoughts, please treat them as so. And a special thank you to Delinander, who was my virtual goose for these flights, a true hero. Alright, starting with the F7CM Super Hornet. This dual-seater fighter is the one to get you right in the Top Gun spirit, performing dogfights with your buddy right behind you. The pilot controls the 2 wing hardpoints and the nose weapon, and the gunner controls the ball turret. Given that we're talking 2-seaters, it's worth adding that replacing the ball turret with the size 4 mount, which I'd usually recommend for the Super Hornet, doesn't seem to translate across to your co-pilot, so if you're running 2-man, you're best off keeping the stock turret. Of the 3 fighters in this comparison, the Super Hornet has the 2nd seat furthest forward, which means that out of combat you'll feel more like a crew. In combat, the Super Hornet delivers 2,763 damage per second with the cannons, which is fairly reasonable. Notably, if you're flying solo, the turret slaves to the pilot, so it's the only fighter in this comparison that maintains that DPS. Having a gunner means you can fire in 2 directions simultaneously, which is a nice boost to firepower. The drawback is the fairly limited capacitors, both for pilot and co-pilot, which means you will have to pause firing at some point. The Super Hornet also comes with a modest selection of missiles, with 8 size 1 that could upgrade to dual size 3. And in terms of keeping on target, the Super Hornet is the most manoeuvrable of the 3 ships we'll talk about today, although that top speed is ever so slightly lower than the Hurricane. It'll cost you 2.1 million Alpha UEC to buy a Super Hornet, making it the most expensive choice. The slowest of the 3 is the Gladiator. Okay, some of you might point out the Gladiator isn't so much a fighter as it is a torpedo bomber type, which is fair enough, but in my review of the Gladiator I talked about how much of a brawler this ship is, so it makes sense to include in the Anvil lineup. The laser armament is fairly tame, and at 2,000 damage per second across both the pilot and co-pilot, it's the lowest in terms of cannon damage. But the capacitors are reasonable, meaning you can continue firing for longer than in the Super Hornet. The firepower is also evenly split between the gunner and the pilot, with each armed with dual Panther size 3 repeaters. But the missile armament is the real selling point for the Gladiator, capable of taking 4 size 3 missiles or higher number of smaller missiles, but also carrying 4 size 5 torpedo missiles, which are great for use against larger targets. Sadly, the Gladiator is the least manoeuvrable of the 3 fighters, although with a gunner you can expect at least one of you to be able to keep on target fairly well. But it's also considerably lower in top speed at a measly 983 meters per second. So the Gladiator is the slowest, least manoeuvrable and lowest DPS with the cannons, but by far and away the strongest in terms of missile loadout. It'll cost you 1.95 million Alpha UEC to buy a Gladiator, which is a little below the cost of the Super Hornet. 3.14 is the patch of the Hurricane. With dual Panther size 3s on gimbals for the pilot to use, and the absolute insanity of quad Panther size 3s for the gunner, the Hurricane is all about the cannon firepower. All of that gives 3000 DPS, which is the highest of the 3, but that's before we talk about capacitors. The turret gunner has an insane amount of staying power, able to continue firing for significantly longer than any of the other fighters in this comparison, which is what makes the Hurricane so deadly. There's a modest addition of 4 size 2 missiles, which is fairly comparable to the Super Hornet. In terms of handling, the Hurricane is a close second to the Super Hornet, although carries a marginally higher top speed. The turret is also the easiest to use of the 3, with a huge amount of firepower. Being a turret gunner in the Hurricane is extremely satisfying. And at 1.2 million Alpha UEC, the Hurricane is the cheapest of the 3 Anvil twin-seaters. So, all 3 ships are fun to fly as a pair of combat pilots. They all bring something slightly different, and so personal preference may start to come into account. The Super Hornet is a wonderful brawler getting in and amongst the enemy. The Gladiator brings heavy torpedoes, which gives great versatility for engaging larger targets. And the Hurricane, well, the Hurricane brings something more. As you may have guessed, the Hurricane is my pick of the 3, largely due to the incredible sustained firepower and the cheapest price of the 3. If you haven't tried the Hurricane, I'd strongly recommend it this patch. It's a truly wonderful experience. But which do you prefer? Would you like to see more of these comparison videos? Let me know in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video, you might press that like button. Otherwise, as ever, thank you for watching.